Torah reading for Vayeshev. First portion. Bereshit, Genesis chapter 37. Verse 1. Jacob settled in Hebron, the region where his father had lived, which is in Canaan. Vayeshev Yaakov be'eretz migurei aviv be'eretz Canaan. Vayeshev Yaakov, the good Jacob settled. After the Torah wrote for you its account of the settling of Esau and his descendants in a brief manner, for they were not fit and esteemed enough to specify how they settled, the sequence of their wars, and how they dispossessed the Horites. Now details for you at length the settling of Jacob and his descendants and all the events that brought them about, since they are considered important before the omnipresent be spoken of at length. Similarly, you find with the 10 generations from Adam to Noah, so-and-so fathered so-and-so, but when the Torah came to Noah, it spoke of him at length. And similarly, with the 10 generations from Noah to Abraham, the Torah spoke of them briefly, but when it reached Abraham, it spoke of him at length. This can be compared to a jewel that fell into the sand. A person searches through the sand and sifts it through a sieve until he finds the jewel, and once he has found it, he discards the pebbles from his hand and takes the jewel. Another explanation of Jacob settled. The camels of a flax dealer entered a city, laden with flax. The blacksmith wondered, where can all this flax be stored? A clever person answered him, one spark coming out of your bellows can burn up everything. Similarly, Jacob saw all the chieftains written above and wondered, saying, who is able to conquer all of them? What is written afterwards? These are Jacob's descendants, Joseph, and it says, the house of Jacob will be a fire, the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau will be stubble. A spark will emanate from Joseph that will destroy and consume all of them. The following narrative is the chronicle of the descendants of Jacob. Joseph was 17 years old and was pasturing the flocks with his brothers. He acted like a young, immature boy. He spent time with the sons of his father's wives Bilhah and Zilpah. Joseph brought their father evil reports about them. באלה תולדות יעקב יוסף בן 17 שנה היה רואה את חיו בצאן, והוא נער את בני בלהה ואת בני זלפה נשי אביו, ויבא יוסף את דיבתם רעה אל אביהם. אלה תולדות יעקב, literally these are Jacob's descendants. Means these are the events pertaining to Jacob's descendants, that these are their settlements and the experiences until they came to a state of permanent settlement. The first cause that began this story was, Joseph was 17 years old, and the ensuing narrative. Through this it came about that they went down to Egypt. This is according to the straightforward meaning of the verse, giving each phrase its proper setting. The Aggadic explanation, however, expounds it like this. The verse primarily associates the progeny of Jacob with Joseph for several reasons. First, the entire reason Jacob had worked for Laban was in order to marry Rachel, Joseph's mother. Joseph's facial features resemble Jacob's, and everything that happened to Jacob happened to Joseph. This one was hated, and the other was also hated. This one, his brother sought to kill him, and the other, his brother sought to kill him, and likewise. Many other similarities mentioned in Bereshit Rabbah. Another way this verse is explained. He settled Jacob wished to live in tranquility, but the troubles with Joseph suddenly came upon him. When the righteous wish to all live in tranquility, the Holy One, blessed be He, says, Is it not enough for the righteous what has been prepared for them in the world to come, that they also wish to all live in tranquility in this world. Veunar, literally nd, he was a young boy, means here that he was acting in a boyish manner. He would groom his hair nd, style his eyes so that he would look handsome. At Bnei Vila with the sons of Bilha, that is, he was regularly in the company of the sons of Bilha, because his brothers would denigrate them nd, he would befriend them. At Deibatam, Ra'a, evil reports about them. Anything improper he observed about his brothers, Leah's sons, he would tell his father, that they were eating a limb torn off a living animal, that they were belittling the sons of the bondwomen Bilha and Zilpah by calling them servants, and that they were suspected of associating with forbidden women. As a result, Joseph was punished in all three areas, because he related that they ate the flesh of a living animal when he was sold. They slaughtered a young goat and did not eat it while it was alive. On account of the report he gave of them that they had called their brother's servants, Joseph was sold as a slave. And on account of that which he told of them associating with forbidden women, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph. Deibatam, every expression of deiba means parlorize in Old French speaking. Thus our verse means, anything bad that he could speak about them, he would report. A similar expression to arousing speech devovev in the lips of the sleeping ones. Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he was the son of his old age. Israel made him a robe of fine wool. גוי ישראל אהב את יוסף מכלבניו כבן זקונים, האולאו, ועשה לאו כתנת פסים. Venskunim, the son of his old age, that is, he was born to him in his old age. Onkelos, however, translates its. Bar Chakim ule, he was a wise son to him, that is, everything that Jacob learned from Shem and ever he transmitted to him. Another explanation, his facial features ziv ikunin were similar to his. Pasim means a garment of fine pure wool, es in karpas utchelet, and es in ketonet pasim mentioned in connection with Tamar and Amnon, which was evidently of princely material. And the Gaadic explanation is, it was a so-called on account of his misfortunes alluded to by its letters, which can be seen as the initials of the words describing his misfortunes, that he was sold to Potiphar, to merchant Socharim, to Ishmaelites Ishmaelim, and to Midianites Midianim. His brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, so they hated him and could not speak with him peaceably. דבר אחיו כי אותו אהב אביהם מכלה אחיו וישנאו אותו, ולא יכלו דברו לשלום. ולא יכלו דברו לשלום, they could not speak with him peaceably. From what is written to their discredit, we see and infer their praise. They could not speak one way with their mouth and feel differently in their heart. Deabro means to speak with him. Then Joseph had a dream and told it to his brothers, and because of this dream, they hated him even more. הויחלום יוסף חלום ויגד לאחיו ויוסיפו עוד שניא אותו. He said to them, please listen to this dream I had. ויאמר עליהם שמעו נא החלום הזה אשר חלמתי. There we were, binding sheaves in the midst of the field, when my sheaf stood up and remained upright. Then your sheaves formed a circle around my sheaf and prostrated themselves before it. זו הנה אנחנו מעלמים עלומים בתוך השדה, והנה קמה אלומתי וגם ניצבה, והנה תישאו בינה אלומתכם ותשתחווינה לאלומתי. Ma'almim alumim, its meaning, ISS Onkelos translates IT. Masrin esarin, binding bundles that AS sheaves, and D similarly we find, carrying his sheaves alumotav, and D likewise in Mishnah Hebrew. One who finds sheaves alumot must take them, and D announce a find. Kama alumati means IT stood straight. Vegam nitzava literally, and D IT was also standing means IT was able to remain standing upright in its position. His brothers said to him, "Would you really seek to reign over us? Would you really seek to rule over us?" They now hated him even more, because of his dreams and D because of his talk. ויאמרו לו אחיו המלוך תמלוך עלינו אם משול תמשל בנו ויוסיפו עוד השניא אותו על חלומותיו ועל דבריו. ועל דבריו and D because of his literally words that I asked for the evil reports about them that he would bring to their father. He had another dream, and D told to his brothers. He said, "Look, I had another dream, and D there were the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars prostrating themselves before me. ויחלום עוד חלום אחר ויספר אותו לאחיו ויאמר, הנה חלמתי חלום מאוד, והנה השמש והירח ו11 כוכבים משתחווים לי. Verse 10, he retold the dream to his father in his brother's presence. His father chided him. He said to him, "What nonsense is this dream that you had? Will I, your mother, and your brothers indeed come and prostrate ourselves on the ground before you?" ויספר אל אביו ואל אחיו ויגר בו אביו ויאמר לאו מה החלום הזה אשר חלמתיה הבוא נבוא אני ואמך ואחיך להשתחרות אף לך ארצה. ויספר אל אביו ואל אחיו, he told literally to his father and his brothers that after he first told to his brothers, he then retold to his father in their presence. ויגר בו, his father chided him because he was arousing hatred against himself. הבוא נבוא, will I, your mother, indeed come. But is your mother not already dead? But Jacob did not realize that these details could refer to Bilhah, who raised Joseph as if she was his own mother. Our rabbis learn from here that there is no dream without unfulfilled elements, but Jacob intended to deflect his son's attention from the matter so that they would not be jealous of Joseph. He therefore told him, "Will we indeed come?" Implying, just as the part of the dream concerning your mother cannot come true, as all the other parts of the dream will prove ineffective. Joseph's brothers remained jealous of him, but his father waited expectantly for the matter to unfold. ויקנאו בו אחיו ואביו שמר את הדעבר. שמר את הדעבר, waited expectantly for the matter, means he was waiting and hoping for when it would come about. Similarly, we find, who awaits Shomer God's faithfulness to fulfill his promises, and similarly, lo tishmor for my sins, which means you do not wait to punish my sins. Second portion. Bereshit, Genesis chapter 37. Verse 12, his brothers left to pasture their father's flocks in Shechem. וילכו אחיו לרעות את צאן אביהם בשכם. לרעות את צאן to pasture, flocks. There are dots over the word it, indicating that they went only to pasture themselves. Israel said to Joseph, "Now your brothers are pasturing in Shechem. Come, I will send you to check up on them." Joseph replied to him, "Here I am." יגביואמר ישראל אל יוסף עלהו, אחיך רואים בשכם לך ואשלחך עליהם, ויאמר לאו הנני. הנני, I am here. This is an expression denoting both humility and eagerness. He was eager to fulfill his father's command, even though he knew that his brothers hated him. Israel said to him, "Please go and see how your brothers and the flocks are faring, and bring me back a report." He thus sent him on the journey that would fulfill the profound vision of Abraham, who was interred in Hebron. Joseph arrived in Shechem. ידויאמר לו לחנה ראה את שלום אחיך, ואת שלום הצוען והשיבני דעבר וישלחהו מעמק חברון ויבשיכמה. מעמק חברון literally from the vale of Hebron. But is not Hebron situated on a mountain? Sat says, they went up through the south and came to Hebron? However, it means, he sent him because of the profound Amukah counsel of that righteous man who is buried in Hebron, that is to fulfill that which was told to Abraham the covenant between the pieces that your descendants will be foreigners. Vayeshev, he arrived in Shechem, a place destined for misfortune. There the tribes that is the sons of Jacob sinned by beginning their plotting to kill Joseph. Their dinah had been violated, and there the kingdom of the house of David was divided. Sat says, Rechavam went to Shechem. A man found him wandering in the fields. The man questioned him, saying, "What are you looking for?" וימצאהו איש והנה טועה בשדה, וישאלהו האיש לאמו מה התבקש. וימצאהו איש, a man found him. This was the angel Gabriel. Sat says, and the man v'haish Gabriel. He replied, "It my brothers that I am looking for. Please tell me where they are pasturing." תזוויו אמר את אחי אנוכי מבקש הגעידהנה לי איפה הם רואים. The man answered, "They have distanced themselves from such brotherly sentiments, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to your Dotan legalities,' seeking some legal pretext to kill you." Joseph followed his brothers and found them in Dotan. יזוויאמר האישה נשאו מזה כי שמעתי אומרים נלכה דעותיינה וילך יוסף אחריך וימצאם בדותן. נשאו מזה literally they have moved on from this, that is they have moved themselves away from brotherhood. נלכה דעותיינה let us go to your Dotan, that is let us go to find for you legal conspirations נכלי דתות means to put you to your death. But according to its straightforward meaning, Deotan is the name of a place, and this scripture does not depart from its literal sense. They saw him from afar, and before he reached them, they conspired against him to put him to death. יכוויראו אותו מרחקו וטרם יקרב עליהם, ויתנכלו אותו להמיתו. ויתנכלו, they conspired. The hitpa'el reflexive form indicates that they were filled nitmalu with conspirations nichalim and cunning. Oto here is the equivalent of ito with him, that is against him elav. Simeon said to his brother Levi, "Look, here comes that dreamer." יתוויאמרו איש אל אחיו הנה בעל החלומות על הזבח. Verse 20 So now let us go and kill him and throw him into one of the pits. And we will say, "A wild beast devoured him." But God said, "We will see which succeeds, your plans or his, that is Joseph's dreams." כועתיה הולכו ונהרגהו ונשליכהו באחד הבוראות ואמרנו חיה רעה אכלתהו ונראה מה היו חלומותיו. ונראה מה היו חלומותיו, literally, we will see what will become of his dreams. Rabbi Yitzhak said, this verse calls out for an interpretation. In fact, the divine spirit is saying this phrase. The brothers were saying, let us kill him. And this scripture concludes in response, but we will see what will become of his dreams, that is, we will see whose words will endure, yours or mine. It is impossible, though, that it was the brothers who said, we will see what will become of his dreams, because once they would kill him, his dreams would be worthless. Reuben heard his brother's plan and rescued him from their hands, as follows. He said, let us not strike him a mortal blow. כי וישמע ראובן ויצילהו מידם ויאמר לא נקנו נפש. לא נקנו נפש, let us not literally strike him. So means with a blow to his soul, which is death. Reuben said to them, do not shed blood. Throw him into this pit here in the desert, but do not lay a hand on him. Reuben suggested this in order to rescue him from their hands and bring him back later to his father. ויאמר עליהם ראובן אל תשקודם, השליכו אותו אל הבור הזה אשר במדבר, ויד אל תשלחו בבו למען אציל אותו מידם להשיבבו אל האביו. למען אציל אותו in order to rescue him. The divine spirit testifies here about Reuben that he said this only in order to save his brother, so that he could come later and pull him up from there. He said to himself, I am the firstborn and the oldest of them all. The blemish will be ascribed only to me. Third portion. Bereshit Genesis chapter 37. Verse 23. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his shirt and of the fine woolen robe that he was wearing. כגבי כאשר הבא יוסף אל אחיו, ויפשיטו את יוסף את כותן תבוא, את קטנת הפסים אשר עליו. את כותן תבוא, this was his shirt. את כתונת הפסים, this was the garment that his father had given him in addition to all what he had given each of his brothers. They took him, and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty in that there was no water in it. כעדבי כאחוהו, וישליכו אותו הברה, והבור ריק אין בו מים. והבור ריק אין בו מים, the pit was empty. There was no water in it. From that which it says, the pit was empty, do I not know that there was no water in it? What then do the words there was no water in it come to teach us? That it contained no water, but there were serpents and scorpions in it. The brothers sat down to a meal. They raised their eyes and saw that there was a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were carrying spices, stacked, and lotus, on their way to take them down to Egypt. כהוישבו לחלכם וישאו עיניהם ויראו, והנה אורחת ישמעאלים באה מגלעד וגמליהם, נושאים מכועת וצרי ולוט הולכים להוריד מצרימה. Orachat's meaning ISS Onkelos translates it. Shiarata caravan of it is so called because it consists of wayfarers holchei oracha. Ugamalehem nosim, which the camels were carrying. Why does scripture publicize what their cargo was? To show the reward of the righteous. For Arabs typically carry only kerosene and tar, which have a bad smell, but for Joseph it was divinely arranged that they carry fragrant spices, so that he would not suffer the bad odor. Nachoat, any collection of many kinds of spices, is called nachoat, and so we find, and he showed them the entire house of Nachoto, which means his spice compound. But Onkelos translated it as meaning wax. Tsari is sap that drips from balsam trees, and it is the same as nataf, which is enumerated among the ingredients of the incense used in a tabernacle. Velot it is called lotita in Mishnah Hebrew, and our rabbis explained it in tractate Nida s being an herbal root called Aristolochia birthwort. Judah said to his brothers, "What is to be gained if we kill our brother and conceal his death from our father?" כבויאמר יהודה אל אחיו מהבצע, כי נהרוג את אחינו, וכיסינו את דמו. Mahabetza means what monetary gain. AS Onkelos translates it. Uchisinu et damo literally and we cover his blood means and we hide his death. Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, but let our hand not strike him, for he is our brother, our own flesh. His brothers heeded him. כזלחו ונמכרנו לישמעאלים, וידנו על תיבו, כי אחינו בשרנו, האו וישמעו אחיו. וישמעו, its meaning here, ISS Onkelos translates it. Ukabilo minea, they accepted it from him. Every expression of shmi'ah whose meaning is acceptance of a statement, such as this case, and such as and that Jacob had obeyed Vayishma his father, and we will do and we will heed v'nishma, is translated by Onkelos as nekabel, but every expression of shmi'ah whose meaning is hearing of the ear, as in they heard Vayishmu the voice of God, which was moving about in the garden. And Rebecca had been listening shomat, and Israel heard Vayishama about it, and I have heard Shema. To the complaints there are all translated by Onkelos respectively as Ushamau, Shamaat, Ushama, Shemia Kodamai. A caravan of Midianite merchants also passed by. The brothers hauled Joseph up from the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. The Ishmaelites sold Joseph to the Midianites, and they brought Joseph to Egypt. ככויעברו אנשים מדיינים סוחרים וימשכו, ויעלו את יוסף מן הבור, וימכרו את יוסף לישמעאלים ב20 כסף, ויביאו את יוסף מצרימה. ויעברו אנשים מדיינים, Midianite merchants passed by. This was another caravan, and the scripture is thus informing you that he was sold several times. Vayimashchu, and they hauled that as the sons of Jacob hauled Joseph up from the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites. The Ishmaelites sold him to the Midianites, and the Midianites sold him to Egypt. The next day, Reuben returned. When Reuben went back to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he rent his clothes. כתוישב ראובן אל הבור, והנה אין יוסף בבור ויקרע את בגדיו. וישב ראובן, Reuben went back. He was not present at the sale of Joseph, for it was his day to go and attend to his father. Another explanation. He was busy with his sackcloth and fasting as repentance for having disarranged his father's couch. Verse 30, he returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone. And I where and I go to avoid witnessing our father's grief." לוישב אל אחיו ויאמר, הילד איננו, ואני אנה אניבה. Ana aniva, where Siena ego means where shall I flee from my father's grief? They took Joseph's robe, slaughtered a young goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. לויקחו את קטנת יוסף וישחטו שעיר עזים, ויטבלו את הכותנת בדם. Seir izim, a young goat. Its blood resembles that of a human. Hakuteonet, the robe. This is how the noun appears when in its absolute form, but when it is connected with another word in the construct form, es in, ketonet Yosef, Joseph's robe, ketonet pasim, a robe of fine wool, and ketonet bade, linen tunic, it is punctuated ketonet. They sent off the fine woolen robe via an emissary, and thus brought to their father. They said, via their emissary, "We found this. Please identify it. Is it your son's robe or not?" לבבי שלחו את קטנת הפסים ויביאו אל אביהם, ויאמרו זה את מצאנו הקרנה הקטנת בנך היבואים לו. He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. A wild beast has devoured him. Joseph has been torn to pieces." לגבי יקירה ויאמר קטנת בני חיירה, חלתהו טרף טורף יוסף. ויאמר קטונת בני, literally, and he said, my son's robe is this. חיה רעה חלתהו, a wild beast has devoured him. He had a spark of the divine spirit of prophecy, for eventually Potiphar's wife, who may be compared to a wild beast, would attack him. And why did the Holy One, blessed be He, not reveal to him that Joseph was alive? Because the brothers had placed under a ban and a curse anyone who would reveal this before they all agreed it was time to do so. And had made the Holy One, blessed be He, a party with them to this agreement, that he would indicate to them when the appropriate time had come. Isaac, however, did know that Joseph was alive, but he said, "How can I reveal to Jacob the truth when the Holy One, blessed be He, does not wish to reveal it to him?" Jacob rent his clothes, put on sackcloth around his waist as a symbol of mourning, and mourned for his son for many days. לדווי קרא יעקב סימלותיו וישם שק במתניו ויתאבל על בנו ימים רבים. Yamim Rabim, for many days, that is 22 years from the time Joseph left him until Jacob went down to Egypt. For it says, Joseph was 17 years old when he left Jacob, and he was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, making 13 years, and the 7 years of plenty, and the 2 years of famine which had passed when Jacob came to Egypt, making altogether 22 years. These correspond to the 22 years that Jacob did not fulfill the duty of honoring his parents, 20 years that he was in Laban's house, and the 2 years he spent on the way returning from Laban's house, 1.5 years 80 Sukkot, and the 6 months 80 Bethel. That is what is meant by what he said to Laban. It is now 20 years that I have been literally for me in your household. Those 20 years were for me, that they are my responsibility, and I will eventually be punished for them correspondingly. All his sons and daughters attempted to console him, but he refused to be comforted, saying, "And I will go down to the grave in mourning for my son." Jacob's father Isaac wept for him. להיויקומו חלבניו וחלבנותיו לנחמבו, וימאן להתנחם ויאמר, כי ירד אל בני, אבל שלה ויבכותו אביו. וחלבנותיו and all his daughters. Rabbi Yehuda said, twin sisters were born with each of the tribes, and they each married a half-sister. Rabbi Nechemiah said, their wives were in fact Canaanite women. What, then, is meant by all his daughters? It refers to his daughters-in-law, for a person does not hesitate to call his son-in-law his son, and his daughter-in-law his daughter. Vayima'en leitnachem, but he refused to be comforted. A person cannot become consoled for a living person whom he believes to be dead, for regarding a dead person it is divinely decreed that he eventually be forgotten from the heart, but not regarding a living person. Ered el bni, literally, I will go down to my son. El bni has the same meaning as al bni for my son. There are many cases where el is used in the sense of al for, that is for all your sin against Saul and for all the house of bloodshed that he caused. Because of all the ark of God being captured and because of all the father-in-law and her husband dying. Avel Sheola, according to all the straightforward sense, Sheol means grave, that Isai should be buried in Emoi mourning and will not be comforted during Emoi entire lifetime. But its midrashic explanation is that Sheol means purgatory, that the sign was given to Omi by the Almighty. If none of Emoi's sons die during Emoi lifetime, I am assured that I will not see purgatory. Vayevach oto aviv, his father wept for him. This refers to Isaac, who wept because of Jacob's suffering, but he did not mourn, because he knew that Joseph was alive. Meanwhile, the Midianites, that is Midianites, had sold Joseph to the government of Egypt, specifically to Potiphar, a courtier of Pharaoh and the chief of his butchers. לבהמדנים מכרו אותו אל מצרים לפוטיפר סריס פרעה שר התעבכים. התעבכים butchers, that is slaughterers of the king's animals. Fourth portion. Bereshit, Genesis chapter 38. Verse 1. Judah stepped down from his position of leadership over his brothers at that time. He moved away from them and entered into a business partnership with a man from Adulam by the name of Chira. ויהי בעת ההיא וירד יהודה מאת אחיו ואת הדיש אדולמי ושם מוכירה. ויהי בעת ההיא at that time. Why is this section placed here, interrupting the subject of Joseph? Isto teach us that Judah's brothers demoted him from his prominent status when they saw their father's grief. They said to him, "You told us to sell Joseph. Had you told us to return him to our father, we would have listened to you." Vayet, he moved away from his brothers. Adaish Adulami, literally to a man from Adulam, that he made a business partnership with him. Judah saw the daughter of a certain merchant named Shue. He married her and engaged in marital relations with her. ב"וירשם יהודה בת האיש, כנעני ושמו שאול ויקח ויבא אליה. Knani here means a merchant. She conceived and gave birth to a son, and Judah named him Ir. גבתה ותלד בן ויקרא את שמו Er. She again conceived and gave birth to another son, and she named him Onan. דבתה עוד ותלד בן ותקרא את שמו Onan. Once more she gave birth to a son, and she named him Shelah. When she gave birth to this child, Judah was in Kaziv. הבתסף עודה ותלד בן ותקרא את שמו שלה, והיה וכזיב בליטה אותו. והיה וכזיב, he was in Kaziv. This is the name of the place. I say that it was called Kaziv ceasing because she ceased giving birth there. It being of the same meaning as Suret Omi, like a failing spring Achzav, and whose water never ceases Ichazvu, for if not, what is the verse coming to tell us? And in Bereshit Rabba Ai have seen the following. She called him Shelah. That is psakat ceasing. Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. ויבקח יהודה אישה לער בקוראו ושמה תמר. Judah's firstborn, was evil in God's eyes, so God made him die. ויהי ער בחבור יהודה רע בעיני יהובה וימיתהו יהובה. רע בעיני evil in God's eyes with the same evil as Onan, that he wasted his seed. This we know since it says about Onan, God made him also die, that Onan's death was for the same reason as Ir's death. Andy, why did Er waste his seed? So that Tamar should not become pregnant and thus her beauty be impaired. Judah said to Onan, marry and engage in marital relations with your brother's wife and thus fulfill the duty of the brother of a deceased husband to her. In this way, you will produce offspring for your brother. ויאמר יהודה לאונן באלה אשת אחיך, ויבם אותה, והקם זרעה לאחיך. והקם זרע and produce offspring that the son will be called after the dead brother. Onan knew that the offspring would not be considered his, so when he engaged in marital relations with his late brother's wife, he let his seed go to waste on the ground, as not to produce offspring for his brother. וידע אונן כי לא לאו יהיה הזרע, והיה עם בעל אשת אחיו, ושיחת ארצה לבלתי נתן זרע לאחיו. ושיחת ארצה, he let his seed go to waste on the ground. He would thresh inside and let the seed scatter outside. Verse 10. What Onan did was evil in the eyes of God. God made him also die. יבשרה בעיני יהובה אשר עשה וימת גם אותו. Judah said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, remain a widow in your father's house for another year, until my son Shelah grows up, for he thought, if he marries her, he, too, might die like his brothers did. So Tamar went to live in her father's house. ויאמר יהודה לתמר כלתבוא שבי אלמנה, ותאבי חדי גדלה שלה בני, כי אמר פני המהות גם מהרו כאחיו ותלך תאמר ותשב בית אביה. כי אמר וגו, for he thought. In other words, he was holding her off with straw an excuse, for it was not his intention to marry her to Shelah. כי אמר פני המות, for he thought. He, too, might die, for of this woman it may be presumed that her husbands die prematurely. Many days, that a year or so, passed, and Shua's daughter, Judah's wife, died. After Judah was consoled, he went up, together with Chira, his Adulamite friend, Timnah supervised the shearers of his flock. וירבו הימים ותאמתה בתשוע אשת יהודה, וינחם יהודה, ויעל על גאוזזי צונו ההוא, וחירה רעהו האדולמי תימנתה. ויעל על גוזזי צונו, literally, he went up over the shearers of his flock, means he went up Timnah supervise the shearers of his flock. Tamar was then told as follows, your father-in-law is now going up Timnah shear his flock. יגבהו געד לתמר לאמר, הנה חמיך עולה תימנתה לגז צונו. עולה תימנתה is going up Timnah. But about Samson it says, Samson went down Timnah. The reason is that it was situated on a mountain slope. From one side one goes up it, and from the other side one goes down it. So she took off a widow's garb, covered herself with a veil, wrapping it also around her face so she would not be recognizable, and sat it the crossroads on the way up Timnah, for she saw that Shelah had grown up and yet she had not been given to him as a wife. יד ותעשרה בגדי אלמנותה מעליה ותכס בצעיף ותתעלף ותשווה בפתחה עיניים, אשר על דרך תימנתה כי ראתה כי גדל שלה, והיבוא לו הניתנה לה או לאישה. ותתעלף, literally, she wrapped herself that as she covered her face completely so that he would not recognize her. ותשב בפתח עיניים, she sat literally, the opening of the eyes means a place where eyes עיניים מהראי open פתיחת, that is the crossroads on the way to Timnah. But our rabbis explained the entrance petach of the tent of our forefather, Abraham, which all eyes עיניים hope to see. כי ראתה כי גדל שלה, וגו for she saw that Shelah had grown up. She therefore offered herself to Judah, because she desired to bear children descended from him. When Judah saw her, he mistook her for a prostitute, because she had covered her face. תביא וירא היהודה ויחשבה לזונה כי כיסתה פניה. ויחשבה לזונה, he mistook her for a prostitute, because she was sitting at the crossroads. כי כיסתה פניה, because she had covered her face and thus he could not see her face and recognize her. But our rabbis explained because she had covered her face, as implying when she had been in the house of her father-in-law Judah, she was modest and kept her face covered, and therefore he did not now suspect that this woman could be her. He turned aside to her, going over to the road where she was sitting, and said, "If you consent, please prepare yourself, and I will come to you," for he did not realize that she was his daughter-in-law. She replied, "What will you give me as payment if you come to me?" תזווה את אליה אל הדרך ויאמר הבהנה אבוא אלייך כי לא ידע כי חלה תבוא, היא ובתאמר מה היא תיתן לי כי תבוא אליי. ואת אליה אל הדרך he turned aside to her. To the road means, from the road on which he was, he turned aside to the road on which she was. In Old French, distaller to turn aside. Havahana, please prepare yourself, that is prepare yourself and your mind for this. Every term of is an expression of preparation, except where is to be translated in a sense of giving. And even those meaning preparation are closely meaning to giving. He said, "I will send you a kid goat from a flock." And she replied, "Provided you give me a pledge for security until you send it." יזוויאמר אנוכי אשלחה גדי עזי מן העצן ותאמר אם תיתן ערבבון עד שלחך. Arabon means a pledge. He asked, "What pledge should I give you?" And she answered, "Your signet ring, your cloak, and the staff that is in your hand." He gave them to her and engaged in carnal relations with her, and she conceived from him. יחוויאמר מה הערבון אשר אתן לך ותאמר חותמך ופתילך ומתך אשר בידך ויתן לה ויבא אליה ותאהר לו. חותמך ופתילך, literally your seal and your string. Onkelos translates this as, "Izakatach v'shoshippach your ring and your garment," that is the ring that you use as a seal and your garment with which you clothe yourself. V'teahar lo and she conceived from him. The word lo literally to him signifies that she conceived strong men like him and righteous men like him. She arose and left, took off her veil, and donned her widow's garb. יתבתעקם ותלך ותאסר צעיפה מעליה ותלבש בגדי אלמנותה. Verse 20. Judah sent a kid goat with his friend the Adulamite in order to get a security pledge back from a woman, but he could not find her. וישלחה יהודה את גדי העזים ביד רעהו האדולמי לקחת הערבבון מיד האישה ולא מצאה. He questioned the people of her area, saying, "Where is that prostitute who was at the crossroads by the wayside?" They replied, "There was an prostitute here." כי הוישאל את אנשי מקומה לאמור איה הקדשה, היבוא בעיניים על הדרך וימרו לא הייתה וזה קדשה. הקדשה means a woman who is designated מקודשת and prepared for prostitution. He returned to Judah and said, "I did not find her." And even the local people said, "There was an prostitute here." כביישבה אל יהודה ויאמר לו מצאתיה, וגם אנשי המקום אמרו לו הייתה וזה קדשה. So Judah said, "Let her keep what I gave her as a pledge, lest we become the object of public scorn. Look, I did send her this kid goat, but you did not find her. כי ויאמר יהודה תיקחה לה פן יהיה לבוז הנה שלחתי הגדי הזה, ועתיה לא מצאת. תיקחה לה literally let her take for herself means let what is in her possession remain hers. פן יהיה לבוז lest we become the object of scorn. If you continue looking for her, the matter will become publicized and will cause disgrace. For what more sien aidoti o fulfill my word? Hine shlachtei hagedi haze look, I did send her this kid goat. Because Judah had deceived his father by means of a kid goat, for he dipped Joseph's robe in its blood, he, too, was deceived through a kid goat. Some 3 months went by, and Judah was informed as follows: Your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of licentiousness, the proof being that she is even visibly pregnant from it. Judah said, Bring her forth and have her burned. כעד ויהי או כמשלש חודשים ויוגעד ליהודה לאמור זנתה תאמר כלתך, וגם היא נהרה לזנונים, ויאמר יהודה הוציאוה ותשרף. כמשלש חודשים some 3 months, that is most of the first month, most of the last 3rd month, and the complete middle month. The expression כמשלוש חודשים means when the months came in a group of 3. The form משלוש is thus similar to all the verbal noun forms of with the sending of ומשלוחה food gifts, and the plundering משלוח ידם. Uncle Oz also translates it this way, כי תלתות ירחיה. הרה לזנונים, she is pregnant from it. Hara is an adjective meaning pregnant, as in a pregnant hara woman, and dissimilar in form to bright bara as the sun. Utisaref and have her burned. Ephraim Maksha'a said in the name of Rabbi Meir, she was the daughter of Shem, who was a priest, and therefore the sentence to be burned. As she was being brought to be burned, she sent word to her father-in-law as follows: I am pregnant by the man to whom these belong. And she added, whose signet ring, cloak, and staff are these? Please acknowledge that you are the father. כההיא ומוצאת וישלח על חמיה לאמור לאישה אשר האלה לא אנוכי הרב התאומר הקרנה למי החותמת והפתילים והמטה האלה. היא ומוצאת she was being brought to be burned. והיא שלחה על חמיה, she sent word to her father-in-law. She did not wish to shame him by saying, I am pregnant by you. Rather, she said, I am pregnant by the man to whom these belong. She said to herself, if he admits it of his own accord, let him admit, but if not, let them burn me, but I will not put him to shame. From here our rabbi said, it is better for a person to let himself be thrown into a fiery furnace than to put his fellow man to shame in public. Hakerna, please acknowledge. The word na is here an expression of entreaty. Please acknowledge your Creator and not cause the end of 3 lives. Judah recognized these items as being his. He said, she is correct. She is pregnant by me. She was justified in contriving to conceive by me, since I did not give her in marriage to my son Shelah as I had promised. He was never again intimate with her. כבי ויקר יהודה ויאמר צדקה ממני, כי על כן לא נתתיה לשלבני, ולא יסף עוד לדעתיה. צדקה, she is correct in her words. Mimeni by me she is pregnant. And our rabbis of blessed memory interpreted this to mean that a divine voice announced, Mimeni for me and through me these things came about. Because she was modest in her father-in-law's womb, I decreed that the line of kings be descended from her. And I have also decreed to establish the line of kings in Israel from a tribe of Judah. Ki al ken lo antatiya, since I did not give her the re'es for ki she acted correctly, because al ken I did not give her to Emoy son Shela. Ulo Yasaf od, some say that this means he was not intimate with her again, while others say it means he did not cease being intimate with her. A similar case to this we find in connection with Eldad and Medad, Velo Yasapu, which some translate as, but they did not continue to prophesy, but Onkelos translates as Velapasaku and they did not cease to prophesy. As Tamar was giving birth, the midwife saw that there were twins in her womb. כזוויה בעת לידתה והנה תאומים בבטנה. בעת לידתה literally the time of her giving birth. But about Rebecca it says, literally her full term to give birth was completed veimal'u, for there the months of pregnancy were complete, while here they were short of the full term. Vehine teomim, there were twins. Here, the word teomim, twins, is written in full, while there, regarding Rebecca, it is written tomim without an aleph and yod, because the one of them was wicked, whereas these twins were both righteous. While she was in labor, one of the babies stuck out his hand from the womb. The midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it on his hand to signify, this one emerged first. כחוויה בלידתיה ויתן יד ותיקחה המילדת ותקשור על ידו, שני לאמור זה יצא ראשונה. ויתן יד, literally, he gave a hand. One of them stuck his hand outside, and after the midwife tied the scarlet thread around his hand, he withdrew it. But as soon as he withdrew his hand, his brother emerged, and his mother said, with what vigor have you pushed yourself ahead? S.O. Judah named him Peretz, breaking through. כתוויה או כמשיב ידעו, והנה יצא אחיו ותאמר מהפרצתיה, עליך פרץ ויקרא שמו פרץ. Paratzatea means you exerted a strong effort. Verse 30, then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his hand, emerged, and Judah named him Zirak, shining, after the scarlet thread. לא אחרי יצא אחיו אשר על ידו השני ויקרא שמו זרח. אשר על ידו השני, who had the scarlet thread on his hand. There are 4 instances here of the word yad, corresponding to all the 4 forbidden spoils charamim that Achan, a descendant of Zirak, violated. Others say that they correspond to all the 4 articles that he took from the prohibited spoil of Jericho: a shinear cloak, 2 pieces of silver worth 200 shekels, and a bar of gold. Vayikra shmo zarach, and he named him Zirak, shining, on account of the shining appearance richat of the scarlet thread. 5th portion. Bereshit, Genesis chapter 39. Verse 1, Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, a courtier of Pharaoh and chief of his butchers, a prominent Egyptian, had bought him from the Midianites, who had in turn bought him from the Ishmaelites, and had brought him down there. O Yosef הורד מצרימה ויקנהו פוטיפר סריס פרעה שר הטבחים, איש מצורי מידה הישמעאלים אשר הורידוהו שמע. Vayeshev הורד, Joseph had been taken down. The Torah now returns to the original subject, which it would have naturally continued uninterrupted, except that it interrupted it in order to juxtapose the demotion of Judah with the sale of Joseph. To indicate that on account of Judah's role in Joseph's sale, the brothers demoted him from his prominent status. Another reason for this order is to place the story of Potiphar's wife next to that of Tamar, T.O. tell you that just as Tamar acted for the sake of heaven, so did Potiphar's wife act for the sake of heaven, for she foresaw through her astrological means that she would be an ancestress of his children, but she did not know if they would come from her or from her daughter. God was with Joseph, and thus he became a successful man, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. בויהי יהוה את יוסף ויהי איש מצליח ויהי בבית אדוניו המצרי. Joseph's master saw that God was with him, that God granted Joseph success in everything he did. וירא אדוניו כי יהוה איתו וכל אשר הוא עושה יהוה מצליח בידו. Ki he'ito, that God was with him, that is the name of God, literally heaven was regularly on his lips. Joseph thus gained favor with him, and became his attendant. His master put him in charge of his household, entrusting all that he owned into his care. וימצא יוסף חן בעיניו וישר את עטבו, ויפקידהו על ביתו, וכל ישלו נתן בידו. וכל ישלו all he owned. This is an abbreviated phrase, the word asher that is omitted after v'chal. As soon as he had put him in charge of his household and all that he owned, God blessed the Egyptian's household in Joseph's merit. God's blessing was evident in everything his master had, both in the house and in the field. הווי מאז יפקיד אותו בביתו, ועלה על אשר ישלו, ויברך יהוה את בית המצרי בגלל יוסף, ויהי ברכת יהוה בכל אשר ישלו בבית ובשדה. He left everything he had in Joseph's care, and did not concern himself with any of his own affairs other than the bread he ate, a euphemism for his wife. Although he knew his father was mourning for him, Joseph was fixated on his beautiful facial form and complexion. ויעזב כל אשר עלו ביד יוסף ולא ידע איתו מהאומה, כי אם מהלחם אשר הוא אוכל, ויהי יוסף יפתער ויפה מראה. ולא ידע איתו מהאומה, literally, and he knew nothing of what was his means, he paid no attention to anything of his. כי אם מהלחם, other than the bread. This refers to his wife, but the Torah uses a euphemism. Vayhi Yosef Yiftoar, Joseph was of beautiful form. Once he saw himself in control of the house, he began to eat and drink and groom his hair. The Holy One, blessed be he, then said, "Your father is mourning, and you are grooming your hair. I will incite the bear against you." Immediately. Sixth portion. Bereshit, Genesis chapter 39. Verse 7. God articulated his intention to correct Joseph's insensitivity. After these words, Joseph's master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph. She approached Joseph and said, "Sleep with me." ויהי אחרי הדברים האלה, ותישא אשת אדוניו את עיניה אל יוסף, ותאמר, שכבה עמי. ותישא אשת אדוניו, which his master's wife cast her eyes. Wherever it says אחר and not אחרי, it means soon after. He refused, and said to his master's wife, "Look, my master does not concern himself with what I do in the house, and all that he owns he has entrusted to my care." וימאן ויאמר אל אשת אדוניו, הן אדוני לא ידע איתי מה בבית, וכל אשר ישלה נתן בידי. There is no one in this house having more authority than I, and he has withheld nothing from me except yourself. Since you are his wife, so how could I commit such a great wrong as betraying his trust, and at the same time also sin before God? תעננו גדול בבית הזה הממני, ולא חסך ממני מהאומה, כי מותך באשר תשתבו, ואיך אעשה הרעה הגדולה הזו את וחטאתי לאלוהים. וחטאתי לאלוהים and sin before God. The descendants of Noah were commanded against forbidden relations. Verse 10. Although she spoke to Joseph day after day, he did not listen to her, not even agreeing to lay next to her. Joseph knew that having relations with her would require that he be with her in purgatory to be cleansed for having thus defiled himself. יבייהי כדברה אל יוסף יבום או יבום, ולא אשמה אליה לשכב אצלה להיות עמה. לשכב אצלה אלאי next to her even without having relations. להיות עמה be with her in the world come. On a certain day, Joseph came into the house to do his work. None of the members of the household were present in the house except for his master's wife. יבייהי כהיום הזה ויבא הביתה לעשות מלאכתו, ואין איש מאנשי הבית שם בבית. ויהי כהיום הזה, literally on this day that Sat was when a special day arrived, a day of merriment, the day of the festival, when they all went to the idolatrous temple. She said, I have an day auspicious as this day to be with Joseph. As she told her attendants, I am unwell and I cannot go to the temple. לעשות מלאכתו to do his work. Rav and Shemuel differed in the explanation of this phrase. One said, to do his work in a literal sense, and the other said, to have relations with her, but a vision of his father's face appeared to him and he resisted temptation, as stated in Tractate Sota. She caught hold of him by his garment and said, Sleep with me. He left his garment in her hand and fled, and went outside. יבבתי תפסהו בבגדו לאמו שכבה עמי ויעזר בגדו בידה ואנס ויצא החוצה. When she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled outside. יגבייהי כי ראותה כי יעזב בגדו בידה ואנס החוצה. She called the members of her household and said to them as follows, See, my husband brought you a Hebrew man to mock you. He came to me to Elai with me, but I cried out loudly. ותקרא לאנשי ביתה ותאמר להם לאמור ראו הביא לנו איש עברי לצחק בנו בא אלי לשכב עמי ואקרא בכבול גדול. ראו הביא לנו C. He brought you S. This is an abbreviated statement. He has brought you S, but it does not specify who brought him. She said this about her husband. Ivri Hebrew. This name means from the other side Ever of the Euphrates River, and also from the descendants of Ever. As when he heard how I raised my voice and screamed, he left his garment with me and fled, and went outside. תביא ויהי כשמעבו כי יהרימתי קולי ואקרא ויעזר בגדו אצלי ואנס ויצא החוצה. She kept his garment with her until Joseph's master came home. תזבתי הנחה בגדו אצלה עד בו אדוניו אל ביתו. Adonai, his master, that is Joseph's. And he spoke to him along these lines, saying, The Hebrew servant whom you brought us came to me to mock me by trying to seduce me. יזבתבר אליו כדברים האלה למרבה אלי העבד העברי אשר אהבת לנו לצחק בי. בא אלי came to me that is the Hebrew servant whom you brought us came to me to mock me. Then, when I screamed at the top of my voice, he left his garment with me and fled outside. יחוויהי כהרי מקולי ואקרא ויעזר בגדו אצלי וינס החוצה. When his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, saying, Your servant did these kinds of things to me, he was furious. יתוויהי כי שמועה אדוניו את דיברי שתבו אשר דיברה אליו לעמוק הדברים האלה עשה לי עבדך ואיחר אפו. ויהי כי שמועה אדוניו וגו when his master heard. She told this to him when they were engaging in marital relations, and this is what she meant when she said, Your servant did these kinds of things to me, that is intimate things such as these. Verse 20 Joseph's master took hold of him and placed him in a prison where the king's prisoners were incarcerated, and he remained in that prison. ויקח אדוני יוסף אותו ויתנהו אל בית הסוהר מקום אשר אסירי כתיב אסורי המלך אסורים וישם בבית הסוהר. God was with Joseph and made him well liked among the inmates. He also made the warden of the prison favor him. כי הווי יהוה את יוסף וית אליו חסד ויתן חינו בעיני שר בית הסוהר. Vayet elav chesed literally and he granted him favor that he was well received by all who saw him. The word chesed is used in a similar sense, a pretty and appealing chasuda bride in Mishnaic Hebrew. The warden of the prison placed all the prisoners who were in the prison in Joseph's charge, and whatever was done there was done under Joseph's direction. ויתן שר בית הסוהרה ביד יוסף את כלה האסירים אשר בבית השר, ואת כלה אשר עושים שם, הוא היה עושה. הוא היה עושה literally he would do. Its meaning ISS Onkelos translates IT. IT would be done AT his command. The warden of the prison could not find fault in anything that was under Joseph's charge, for God was with him, and God granted him success in whatever he did. כגאינו שר בית הסוהר רואה את כלמו ומהה בידבו באשר יהוה איתו, ואשר הוא עושה יהוה מצליח. באשר האיתו means because God was with him. 7th portion. Bereshit Genesis chapter 40. Verse 1 Soon after Joseph became a subject of everyone's conversations, the Egyptian king's cupbearer and baker offended their master, the king of Egypt. ויהי אחרי הדברים האלה חטאו משקה מלך מצרים, והאופל לאדוניהם למלך מצרים. אחר הדברים האלה, literally after these words. Because this accursed woman Potiphar's wife made the righteous Joseph a common subject for people's denigrating talk, the Holy One, blessed be he, brought about the lapses of these men so that people would turn their attention to them and not to him, and also saw the relief come to the righteous one through them. Chatu offended. In the case of one, a fly was found in his goblet of spiced wine for Pharaoh, and in the case of the other, a pebble was found in his loaf of bread. Vehaofe and the baker of the king's bread. The term afia is used only with reference to the baking of bread, and a bread baker in Old French is pista. Pharaoh was incensed with his two courtiers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker. בויקצף פרעו על שני סריסה ועל שר המשקים ועל שר האופים. And he had them imprisoned in the prison adjoining the house of the chief butcher, which was the same prison in which Joseph was incarcerated. ויתן אותם במשמר בית שר הטבחים אל בית השר מקבום אשר יוסף אסור שם. The chief butcher assigned Joseph to be in charge of them, so he attended them. They were in prison for a year. ויפקוד שר הטבחים את יוסף איתם וישרת אותם ויהיו ימים במשמר. ויפקוד שר הטבחים את יוסף the chief butcher assigned Joseph to be with them. ויהיו ימים במשמר they were in prison for literally days that is 12 months. One night, the two of them, the Egyptian king's cupbearer and the baker, who were confined in the prison, each had a dream that accorded with its interpretation. ויחלמו חלום שניהם, איש חלומו בלילה אחד, איש כפתרון חלום אבו המשקה, והאופה אשרה למלך מצרים אשר אסורים בבית הסוהר. ויחלמו חלום שניהם, literally they had a dream. The two of them means the two of them had a dream. That is the straightforward meaning of this phrase. But its midrashic explanation is, each one dreamed the dream of both of them chalom shnehem, that is his own dream and the interpretation of his companion's dream. And this is what is meant when it says, the chief baker saw that Joseph had interpreted well. Ish kefitaron chalomo means, each one dreamed a dream that resembled the interpretation which foretold what would happen to them in the future. When Joseph came to them in the morning, it was clear that they were in a melancholy mood. ויבייבא עליהם יוסף בבקר וירא אותם והינם זועפים. זועפים means depressed, as in, sullen and depressed וזעף, and I will bear the displeasure za'af of God. He asked Pharaoh's courtiers who were with him in custody in his master's house, saying, Why are your faces so downcast today? וישאל את תסריסי פרעה אשר איתו במשמר בית אדוניו לאמר מדוע פניכם רעים היום. They answered him, We each had a dream, but there is an one to interpret it. So Joseph said to them, Surely interpretations belong to God. Please tell me your dreams. ויאמרו אליו חלום חלמנו ופותר, אינו תבוא ויאמר עליהם יוסף עלהו לאלוהים פתרונים ספרונה לי. The cupbearer related his dream to Joseph. He said to him, In my dream there was a vine before me. ויספר שרי המשקים את חלומו ליוסף ויאמר לאו בחלומי, והנה הגפן לפני. Verse 10 And on the vine there were 3 branches. It seemed to be budding, then it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. ובגפן 3 שריגים, והיבוא כפור אחתה, עלתה ניצה, היא בשילו אשכלותיה הענבים. Sarigi means long branches, which are called vidais in Old French. Vehiu kfor achat means it was similar to blossoming, that is vehiu kfor achat means, it appeared to me in my dream as if it were blossoming, and then after the flower fell off, it budded and formed into small unripe grapes as paneer in Old French and afterwards they ripened. Veichad afrachat apekat labelvin and when it blossomed it brought forth flowers as all Onkelos translation of vehiu keforachat, netzebad of a fruit as a more advanced stage than perach a blossom, as it is written. After the blossom perach falls and the bud nitza becomes a ripening grape. Arba and as it is written. It produced blossoms ferach and afterwards it sprouted buds tzitz. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. I took the grapes and squeezed the juice into Pharaoh's cup. Then I placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. יאוחוס פרה בידי ויקח את הענבים ואסחט אותם אל הכוס פרעה ואתן את הכוס על כף פרעה. ואסחט its meaning ISS Onkelos translates it. והצרית and I squeezed. There are many examples of this word in Mishnaic Hebrew. Joseph said to him, this is its interpretation. The 3 branches symbolize 3 days. ויאמר לאו יוסף זה פתרונו של 12 רגעים של 6 ימים הם. של 6 ימים הם literally are 3 days, that is they are a symbol for you for 3 days. There are also many Agadic explanations of this verse. In 3 days' time, Pharaoh will take due account of you and restore you to your position. You will place Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used the odor when you served him his drinks. יגבבוד או שלשת ימים יישא פרעה את ראשך והשיבך לקנך, ונתתיה כוסיפרו בידבו כמשפטה הרשבון אשר ראית משקהו. יישא פרעה את ראשך. Pharaoh will literally raise your head. This has the sense of counting, that is when he takes note of his other servants to attend to him at the meal, he will count you among them. Kanecha means your post and your position. So if you keep me in mind when things go well for you, please do me the kindness of mentioning me to Pharaoh, and thus you will get me out of this prison building. ידע כי אם זכרתני איתך כאשר היטב לך ועשיתנה עמדי חסד, והזכרתני אל פרעה, והוצאתני מן הבית הזה. כי אם זכרתני איתך means you will have influence at the court, such that if you remember me, taking your memory of me with you after things go well with you in accordance with my interpretation. ועשיתנה עמדי חסד, please do me the kindness. The word naes here is an expression of request. You will be doing me a kindness by mentioning me to Pharaoh. For in fact I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and here, too, I did nothing to warrant them putting me in a dungeon. תוקיגון ופגעו נבטאי מארץ העברים, וגם פה לא עשיתי מהאומה כי שמו אותי בבור. When the chief baker saw that Joseph had interpreted well, he said to Joseph, in my dream, likewise, there were 3 wicker baskets on my head. תז וירא שרי האופים כי טוב פתר ויאמרה אל יוסף אפני בחלומי, והנה 3 סלי חורי על ראשי. סלי חורי means baskets made from peeled reeds, made in such a way that they have many holes chorin chorin. In our country there are many, and the idea is common for sellers of bread rolls, called oblis in Old French, to put them in such baskets. In the top basket there were all kinds of baked goods that Pharaoh eats, and the birds were eating them from a basket above my head. יזובסל העליון מכל מאכל פרעה מעשה אופה והאבוף אוכל אותה מן הסל מעל ראשי. Joseph replied as follows. This is its interpretation. The 3 baskets symbolize 3 days. יחוויין יוסף ויאמר זה פתרונו של 7 הסלים של 7 ימים הם. In 3 days' time, Pharaoh will decapitate you and hang your corpse on a gallows, and the birds will eat your flesh. יתבבוד או של 7 ימים יישא פרעה את ראשך מעליך, ותלה אותך על עץ ואכל לאבוף את בשרך מעליך. Verse 20 On the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he held a feast for all his servants, and counted the chief cupbearer and the chief baker among his servants. כוואי או ביום השלישי יבום, ולדת את פרעה ויעש משתה לחל עבדיו ויישא את הרעש או שר המשקים, ואת הרעש שר האופים בתבוך עבדיו. יום הולדת את פרעה means the day of Pharaoh's birth, known as Genosia Day in Greek. The reason the word used as hulet hafal passive causative is because a baby is born only with assistance of others, for the midwife aids the woman to give birth. The midwife is therefore called mieledet pael, one who causes birth. Similarly we find, and your birth, on the day you were delivered huledet otacha, and similarly, after the lesion has been washed to kabes for its washing is done by others. Vayisa et rosh vego means he counted them among his other servants, for he was counting those who would serve him his meal and took note of these among them. This phrase is similar to os u et rosh take a census, that is an expression of counting. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position of serving drinks, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. כי וישב את שר המשקים על משקהו ויתן הכוס על כף פרעה. The chief baker, however, he hanged, just as Joseph had interpreted for them. כבועט שר האופים תעלה כאשר פתר להם יוסף. The chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot about him. כגולו זכר שרה המשקים את יוסף וישכחהו. ולא הזכר שרי המשקים, the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph on that day. וישכחהו and forgot him. Afterwards, because Joseph had placed his sole dependence on him to remember him, Joseph needed to remain imprisoned for another 2 years. Sat says, happy is the man who places his trust in God and does not turn to the arrogant Rehavim. That is, and he does not place his trust in Egyptians, who are called Rahav arrogant. End of Parasha Vayeshev.